Hello again, if I did this right, which I did not, but okay, I'm trying to do one podcast a day until I'm back on my schedule and I can resume releasing them once a week. Yeah, by my math, I'll be back on schedule by the end of October if I do one podcast nearly every day. I'm not quite there, but I think I can manage some semblance of that. It helps that I'm not at work anymore. The restaurant is a summer job, and it closed at the end of September, so I've got all the free time in the world now. I had planned to be back in Quincy, Illinois by now to work on theatrical pursuits, but my therapist wants me to stick with him for another 6 months, so I'm gonna do that. Gotta get better. Let's see, other news. Well, my birthday was last month. I'm 27. Doesn't feel right. I felt 25, I kind of felt 26. I don't feel 27. 27 feels too old and mature for the way I am. I don't know. And, final piece of news, I've had this giant hole in a wisdom tooth for the better part of 2 years, steadily expanding. Last time I went to the dentist, they just told me not to worry about it, but last night it started hurting real bad, so, I hope to be seeing a dentist pretty soon to, get rid of that. Anyway, let's move on to the fanfiction segment, where we'll be finishing up reading Book 2 of the three-way crossover saga, ICBG. I haven't had as much fun with the second part as I did with the first. Let's see how it goes. Chapter 8, A Discovery, is narrated by Iggy. Fang and Gazzy drag Iggy into the garage for Fang's garage band idea. Iggy plays piano, Fang plays guitar, Gazzy sings. The three girls in the flock are out shopping at the moment, but Fang hopes to get them in on it as well, turning the flock into a band. Is that a fanfiction cliche? Turning the cast into a band? It seems like it should be a fanfiction cliche, but I've never seen it. Then they're attacked by Ray and Ram, two members of the ICBG who respectively resemble a spotted eagle ray and a big goat, though this isn't revealed at this time, as Iggy cannot see them, and we get a fight scene from the perspective of the blind guy, which would have been fascinating if I'd been any kind of writer back then. Iggy gets some fluff off of Ram before they retreat, so they figure they've got a DNA sample now, and that can only help. Chapter 9, Governmenty Things, narrated by Jacob. Jacob visits General Monger in his office. Monger assumes that Jacob is there for information about the creatures that attacked his family, but in fact he just wants to know what to get Susan and Doc as wedding gifts. Well, that's stupid. Bad past me. Anyway, Monger gets results back from Felicia's blood and Ram's fur, 2 of 7 dangerous, unstable geniuses kept hidden by the government, who escaped the facility some months ago. There's some bit about how the big guy radiates pure evil, which is surprising. That's very different from what the big guy later developed into in other stories. Chapter 10, Dip, a queso dip chapter. That's a play on Max, a Maximum Ride novel, which is the 5th Maximum Ride novel, I think, so that's funny. Okay, narrated by Link. Bob is mad at Link about something and wrote himself a reminder so he wouldn't forget to be mad at Link, so Link waits until Bob is asleep and gets rid of the reminder, and that's it. What the fuck kind of chapter was that? Chapter 11, Hollywood, narrated by the big guy. The big guy meets with his old contact, Mr. Tran, who has a big weapon for him, a giant robot dragon by the name of Hollywood. As before, I didn't do jack with Mr. Tran or his robot creations. I did them better in later stories, and will do them even better at some future point. Whatever, moving on. Chapter 12, Rehearsal Dinner, narrated by Renesmee. Renesmee is placed at the kids' table at the rehearsal dinner, where she talks with Nudge, who feels like the flock are asking her to choose between the flock and Aaron. Link makes a wedding toast, and I totally TLDR'd it. I'm sure it wasn't worth reading. Chapter 13, Queso Dip Reloaded, narrated by original character Danny, who is an octopus guy. Did he already get one? A chapter? I don't remember. Anyway, Danny and Jewel are to send Hollywood out to mess with the wedding, which is taking place on a cruise ship near Isle Esme. They found the super-secret wedding location by tracking the unique energy signature of Iggy's Queso Dip. Okay, that is a very good queso dip joke. Okay, the final chapter of this totally pointless mess, although I guess the ICBG will be in the next one, if they haven't already been defeated by this point. I hadn't realized. And Chapter 14, Wedding Day, narrated by Insectosaurus. Insectosaurus is flying above the clouds with all the flower girls and ring bearers who fly down to the cruise ship. I like how I arranged that whole thing. It's kind of neat. Then Insecto flies Susan down to the ship, and she steps on. The ceremony happens, and Insectosaurus spots Hollywood approaching, wondering if peace will ever come. And there we go. Kind of a sophomore slump as far as this story goes. I really enjoyed the first one, but this one was pretty dull. Maybe it gets better. We'll see. And now in Droon, we're reading Book 28, In the Shadow of Goll. I think maybe the reason I had so much trouble with the previous book is that I was just so eager to get to this one, which is an awesome, twisty story that leads us directly into Special Edition number 4. Of course, there's probably a lot more to it than just the great twist ending, and I'll probably get bored with that as well. But anyway, here we go. Book 28, In the Shadow of Goll. Yeah, I actually read this one without taking any notes. I was so excited, so now I'll have to read it all again. Chapter 1, The Magic of Friends. We open with Eric and Neil in Eric's attic. Neil practicing with his new genie powers, going through the scroll that the other genies gave him. There's a gag where Mr. Hinkle shows up and is all like, "Neil, I saw you fly, you must be a genie." But it was just Julie, shapeshifted. Yuck, yuck, yuck. They get a message from the soccer ball telling them to join Kia in Agravour. So they do that, finding themselves in the boat that they used for the first time they went that way. But a figure in a black cloak surrounded by purple mist blocks their way. He says a single arcane word and vanishes. Chapter 2, Name the Bad Guy. The kids take the boat to Agravour. The place has been set on fire. Purple flames, making them believe the cloaked figure is responsible. Neil decides to call him Shadowface, and there's a running gag about how no one else will call him that. Yuck, yuck, yuck. But soon, everyone does. So that's what they continue to call him, even after his identity is uncovered, which makes it easy to compile a cast list. But I'm getting ahead of myself. They come across Kia and her parents, who explain that this is magical fire. Galen and Max have just arrived from where he zipped off to the far north because they had to acquire the purple water of Tembish Pa to fight this purple fire. Purple fire, yeah. Inflected that wrong. Purple water for the purple fire. Yeah, okay. With the fire gone, Queen Hazad reports that the warriors of the Scorth have been stolen from where they were entombed in Agravour. Everyone splits up. Zello and Max take the Jaffa Wind to the situation in the Serpent Sea. Relna and Hazad study in Agravour's library to find out about Shadowface's words and origins, and Galen brings the children and Shago along to find out where the Scorth have been taken. They will all meet up at the Horns of Ko. Nice! Chapter 3, At the Horns of Ko. Have I mentioned I love this series? I just love that we saw the Horns of Ko well before we ever knew Ko was an important figure, and now, with Ko as our new big bad, we're returning there. That's pretty awesome. So, as Shago tracks Shadowface and the Scorth, Galen explains the origins of the lump of stone that was taken from Fefarello's turban in the previous book. It's one of 3 stones, enchanted by Zara to give to her 3 sons, and they're meant to be more pieces of the Moon Medallion. Galen fashioned his stone into the Ring of Midnight, and Uruk into the Pearl Sea. Eric doesn't understand how then the Pearl Sea ended up in his house, but Galen says that's a question for another time. Galen thinks that refining this final stone, completing the Moon Medallion to give it its full power, might be the only way to give Droon a bright future. They find Shadowface, who is bringing the Scorth to life, just as Spar once did, and soon all 9 of them are standing erect. I didn't realize there were exactly 9 Scorth warriors. All these years I've just kind of assumed they were a larger force than that. I guess since they're invincible, they don't need to be bigger. Galen asks Neil to travel back in time to check on the Scorth's origins to see if there's a secret they can exploit. 3 hours later, the gang meet up at the Horns of Ko, where, as it happens, the Serpent Sea meets the Sea of Droon, where Goll began. Neil returns, having discovered that 10,000 years ago the Scorth were a crew of pirates, and that they sunk in this very spot. Galen thus believes that Ko wants to raise their ancient ships to form his navy. The legend goes that no earthly ship can sink the Scorth. The massive Scorth ships rise out of the sea. There's a lot going on in this chapter. Julia decides to turn herself into a beast to sneak into their camp, and Neil finds that he can use a genie power to share Julie's shapeshifting between all 4 of our main kids. Chapter 4, Meet the Blugs. The 4 kids have been transformed into not especially scary beasts. Julie still can't do scary beasts, as it turns out. They go down to the encampment and learn from the guards that Gethwing is expecting a group of mercenaries called the Blugs. They claim to be said Blugs. Gethwing invites them in and asks the Blugs to come to him when they're done with Ko. While Ko wants to bring back the ancient empire of Goll, Gethwing would rather look to the future. Gethwing is summoned elsewhere, and Spar tells the kids that the Blugs have information that Ko wants, so if the kids know it, Ko will use the coiled viper to force it out of them. Spar brings them down to the beach, where Ko waits for them on his great big ship. Chapter 5, The Pirate King. With the Viper, Ko gets the information he wanted, Jaffa City's weakness, which Kia knows to be the western seawall. A call from the shore reveals the real Blugs have arrived, but as it turns out, so has Shadowface, who enchants Spar into stealing the Viper from Ko and blasting the entire crew overboard, including the kids. Shadowface's purple fog drags Spar away, and the call goes out that King Zello's navy approaches. The war has begun. Chapter 6, The Ink-Dark Sea. The kids swim to the shore, ditch the beast disguises, and fly to the top of the horns without being seen. Down below, Zello battles some of the serpents of the Serpent Sea. Kia and Eric start a rock slide to dump some rocks all over Ko and boil the water to make the serpents retreat to the deep. They then meet up with the Jaffa Wind, where Relna has evidently discovered some stuff. Chapter 7, Snake Island again. Relna explains that the words uttered by Shadowface are a command in an ancient language that was rediscovered by Spar himself. Max can tell from his maps that Shadowface is taking Spar to Khufu Mountain. They sail there and find it swirling with Shadowface's distinctive purple smoke. They see Spar ascending a staircase deep into the mountain and call to him, but he hears only Shadowface's commands. Pursuing Spar, they find that Shadowface has conjured up even more Skorth warriors than the original 9, which remains the status quo. A whole lot of Skorth in Droon from this point on. Zello and Relna break the Skorth into pieces, and as they reassemble themselves, we find out the Skorth can talk, which makes them significantly less scary in my opinion, but fortunately they don't talk very often. Galen leads the children past the Skorth as the king and queen hold them off. Deep inside the mountain, they find Spar, huddled at the feet of Shadowface. Chapter 8, The Storm Rises. Shadowface beguiles Spar into handing over the coiled Viper. When Spar demands to know who he is, Shadowface states that when a piece of Spar was transformed into the kid Spar we know, another piece was made old and frail. And that's who Shadowface is, the elderly half of Spar, and implicitly also the evil half, with an evil and elderly Chem at his side. Here, where Goll began, where Droon's evil is at its most powerful, they can fuse together and become Lord Spar again. Ko and Gethwing will fight each other soon, and Spar will release his Skorth forces against the winner and truly take over Droon. Shadowface sets the Skorth against the heroes until he and the kid have fused together. Chapter 9, Smiles of the Skorth. The heroes battle the Skorth, and Neil freezes the Bone Men in a block of ice so they can't reassemble themselves. Galen and the kids' wizards try to zap Shadowface, but any damage done to one Spar is dealt to both. The young Spar and Chem fade away into nothingness, and Shadowface and the Elder Chem turn into Spar and Chem in their prime, as we first know them. Pure evil. Chapter 10, From Hand to Hand to Hand. Spar rides away on the Golden Wasp, the black stone Zara made for him clutched in his hand. Gethwing and Ko pursue Spar, leaving the heroes alone, having lost, only hoping they can make it better. So this was awesome. The Skorth return, in bigger numbers, the war for Droon officially begins, and everything about Shadowface and who he is and what he does, it's brilliant. And Kid Spar is effectively killed off. It's just, oh, such a good punch. Good, hard punch from the author to us. And leads us very nicely into the next book, specifically Special Edition number 4. This is a great bit of content in the Droon saga, you know, those 2 books at least, and then let's see, what comes after Special Edition 4? I don't remember. Okay, anyway. For new characters, we have Shadowface. It's not the last time we'll see an elderly Lord Spar, and we'll call him Shadowface to distinguish him from the normal Lord Spar, played by me, even though he doesn't usually wear a hood over his face, but the books call him that too. They call him Shadowface when he's old. So for the elderly version, I'm going to go with Doug Jones, a very underrated actor who would have done great in the prosthetics that would turn him into Shadowface, and I'm sure would do equally good as just, you know, the voice of the character in a cartoon. He's one of those people I just absolutely want to work with someday. Today's Disney films in the Keys and Kingdoms segment come to us from the year 1983. There's Something Wicked This Way Comes and Mickey's Christmas Carol. So we're starting with Something Wicked This Way Comes. I don't really know anything about this film. I don't remember why I chose it for the collection. I know it's based on a novel by Ray Bradbury, which is cool. And I know that I had to get it on DVD because I couldn't find it on digital. Doesn't seem important enough to go in the Disney Vault, so I guess it's just so obscure that it just hasn't gotten a YouTube or Amazon video release, which is surprising considering what I've found there so far. And Something Wicked This Way Comes is, of course, a quote from Macbeth, which just brings back bad memories of the Hogwarts Evil Children's Choir from the third Harry Potter film. I know, the third movie is the best one, except no, it's fucking not. The whole movie is nothing but an absolute bumblefuck of completely stupid directorial decisions. Don't at me. Anyway, that's not the movie we're talking about. It's Something Wicked This Way Comes. Let's see, got my DVD here. Jonathan Pryce is in it. He sounds vaguely familiar. I sort of kind of know that name. That's right. He's Governor Swan from Pirates of the Caribbean. Only in this film, he's not that old. He's actually quite dashing, assuming that's him on the cover. Bradbury wrote the screenplay. That's cool. And let's watch it. We open with what looks like a train very slowly approaching the camera as the opening credits roll. We get a spooky theme that sounds a bit like the Imperial March. And then a nice autumny lakeside. There's whimsical narration about childhood in October. It's kind of like a Christmas story, but around Halloween, I guess, is the impression I get from the opening. Our point of view characters are a pair of 12-year-old boys named Will Halloway and Jim Nightshade. Will, narrating from the future, says the story is really about his father, Charles Halloway, the elderly local librarian, played by Jason Robards. I have no idea where this is going. Wiki. Ooh, this movie was a miserable failure at the box office. Okay, there's a lightning rod salesman by the name of Tom Fury. Nightshade, Fury, and our antagonist, Mr. Dark. Nice names. Apparently, Ray Bradbury is a 12-year-old fanfic writer. There's lots of townsfolk with big personalities. There's a penny-pinching cigar salesman, a horny barber, a sports-loving bartender with one arm and one leg. Lots of local flavor. Keys and Kingdoms note, local flavor. Okay, so there's a carnival coming. Mr. Dark's Pandemonium Carnival. Jim bought a lightning rod from the lightning rod guy. He picked the model with the scarabs on it because his dad is on safari in Africa and never writes. This movie better get good. It's not impressing me yet. Okay, so several people, first Charles, then the lightning rod guy, at this point have passed by the coffin store and had to do a double take at the coffin in the front window, seeing it as a block of ice with a woman encased within, wearing a ruby ring. That's creepy. The carnival comes by train in the middle of the night, and some awesome musical score fires up. I dig the music in this film. So the boys putz around the carnival in the middle of the night. They're scared away by a spider. Charles finds the ruby ring. I don't know. The next morning, the carnival at first seems very ordinary until the bartender goes to a hall of mirrors and sees himself as an athlete with all his limbs. It's so bright in the Hall of Mirrors that just by watching from the outside, our boys are deeply suspicious. A fortune teller wearing the ruby ring tells the barber about where he can find ladies. The cigar store owner wins a game of chance and wins $1,000. So that's what the local flavor is for. They're all getting what they wish for. Our boys check out a broken carousel where they meet the dashing Mr. Dark, played by Jonathan Pryce, and his silent enforcer, Mr. Cougar. Dark is covered in entrancing animated tattoos, which we don't see very much of since 80s special effects. Late at night, the boys return to the carousel and watch as Mr. Dark runs it backwards, which turns Cougar into a young boy. Mr. Dark sets him to work, his work evidently being to pose as the nephew of the local school teacher, Miss Foley. Her nephew, Robert. Okay, I don't really get the purpose there, but I do dig the carousel of age shifting. That's a good detail to keep in mind. So, Charles talks to Will about an incident from their past. Will was drowning in the river, and Charles was too scared, of his frailty due to his age. He doesn't know how to swim. But Jim's dad went in and saved him. This was before Mr. Nightshade went gallivanting off. Meanwhile, Jim asks if he looks like his dad. As for Miss Foley, she looks in the mirror and sees her younger self, then feels her face and finds that it's perfectly true. She's young and beautiful again. But then she goes blind, and Robert/Cougar smirks at her. Jim and Will sneak out of their bedrooms. Is this all happening on the same night? Jeez. Will thinks Jim intends to use the carousel to make himself older. They come upon Mr. Dark interrogating Tom Fury about when the lightning is coming. Fury is babbling and speaking in the third person. The barber and the cigar store guy have been turned into statues. Dark summons forth a beautiful woman. I have no idea what's going on. So the electric torture he's inflicting on Fury gets Jim and Will to scream. They run, they see themselves getting guillotined. Is this woman the same fortune teller? She's wearing the same rings, but I didn't think the fortune teller was black, like this woman appears to be. Just when I thought I had a handle on what was going on in this story, it goes back to confusing me. So Will is disciplined for sneaking out and is apparently starting to suspect that Mr. Dark is the devil. So far I'm not seeing how this is, as future Will narrator claimed, more Charles' story than Will's. So what appears to be even later that same night, geez, Will races to Jim's room as some kind of green fog chases him. What? Then there are tarantulas everywhere. Yeah, I'd criticize the film for trying to pass off tarantulas as scary spiders, but then I have to admit, that many tarantulas everywhere you turn, okay, that is pretty scary. Then lightning strikes the lightning rod, and Will and Jim wake up in their own damn beds. What is happening? Next morning, Mr. Dark... excuse me. Mr. Dark is putting on a parade of musicians and circus freaks. The boys think it's a search for them, and they decide they can't go home because the parade will just follow them there. So they hide in the sewers. The parade includes the young, blind Miss Foley, the two statue men, catatonic Mr. Fury being carried on a throne. The bar is empty. Yeah, we haven't seen yet what became of Ed the bartender. I do like the background with the local color being manipulated by Mr. Dark. That's a good part. Mr. Dark approaches Charles at the bar, asking for the two boys, who he claims have won prizes at the carnival. Charles feigns ignorance, and Mr. Dark shows tattoos of the two boys' faces on his palms. Charles gives Dark fake names for the boys, but Dark has already gotten their real names from Miss Foley. Dark also recognizes Charles from somewhere, and his palms start bleeding. Oh man, this is fucked up. This is very successfully full of tension this moment, and the boys are hiding beneath a sewer grate right under Dark's feet at this point. And the parade resumes. A boy marching in the parade throws a football at Charles. Is that Ed the bartender made into a child? Sure looks like him. Charles whispers to the boys to come to the library tonight. That night, Charles explains that his father kept a journal and talked about a similar carnival that came to town in his day, also granting the townsfolk's largest wishes, and other townsfolk remembered the carnival coming through in their youth. Mr. Dark appears in the library and the boys hide, and he and Charles have some sort of mind games as Dark continues to search for Will and Jim. Charles says Mr. Dark is one of the autumn people, the hungry ones, and Dark confirms this. Dark offers to make Charles young again if he gives up the boys. Charles refuses even as Mr. Dark starts making him older, enough to make him pass out. Dark searches the library for the boys, offering to make Jim an adult as he apparently wishes. Eventually he finds them and grabs them, and is joined in the library by the ghostly fortune teller, telling her to remove the boys' tongues and to give Charles a brief taste of death. The witchy woman has sparkly golden skin this time. I don't know how many of these women there are. Anyway, Dark states that he'll turn Jim into an adult so they can be partners in the carnival. Dark and Nightshade, how appropriate. And he'll turn Will into a baby for some reason. Charles runs through a graveyard. There's a storm coming. He goes to the carnival. Okay then. And he enters the Hall of Mirrors. I did wonder if that would come back. They certainly emphasized it enough. Charles and Will try to find each other in the mirror maze, and Dark monologues to them about everyone else he's tempted and transformed. He makes Charles get older and older until Will comes to the rescue, insisting that he loves his father and won't let him go. Charles pulls his son out of the mirrors, and they bust out of there, but Dark still has Jim and is riding with him on the carousel. The Halloways go to rescue him. Dum-da-dum. Charles speaks some kind of nonsense, and they pull Jim off the carousel, leaving Mr. Dark stuck there and swiftly turning into an old man and dying. And all the horses on the carousel come to life. The hell? And a massive storm destroys the carnival. Okie dokie then. The next day, the boys bring Charles along for their usual frolicking. Charles has accepted his oldness, and it's left ambiguous whether any of the local color are still, alive. The street that contains the barbershop, cigar store, and bar seems suspiciously empty, but, they play in it. They go, yay, playing in that street, but our hero is okay with the fact that he's old. Sure, I guess that's a happy ending. So, that film had its moments, but most of them were shitty what-the-hell moments. So, first film of this collection that I did not actually enjoy and do not recommend checking out. It was more exciting than The Watcher in the Woods, but I just couldn't follow it or get the point. I haven't ranked or tiered the films I've watched so far, but this is definitely bottom of the list. It did provide a few ideas on how devils might tempt people with what they want and then screw them. And we all got... all we got about Mr. Dark's background is that he's one of the autumn people, the hungry ones. Probably doesn't mean anything, but it's very evocative as meaning something. There were some thought-provoking bits. So not a completely worthless viewing experience. But not the greatest. I should do a tier. a tier ranking of all the films, I've seen so far, yeah. And now we have Mickey's Christmas Carol, one of the 3 adaptations of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol in my collection. I love A Christmas Carol. It's one of my favorite stories of all time, and this film, I've never actually seen it. Always wanted to, so this should be nice. After Walt Disney died in '66, Mickey Mouse and his supporting cast kind of faded into obscurity. And this film kind of brought them back into the spotlight. The modern incarnation of all these characters basically debuted here. So yeah, I'm watching a Christmas movie in early October. Yay! Okay, first surprise of the movie, one of the 6 writers is Alan Young, who was the voice of Scrooge McDuck, starting with this film and ending with his death in 2016. A very iconic performance. And what do you know, John Lasseter is listed as creative talent, whatever that means. And let's see, I hear Tony Anselmo was an animator on this project, specifically in charge of animating Donald shortly before he'd be taking over as the voice of the same character, but he's not in the credits here or on IMDb. Maybe that's just some hearsay someone stuck onto the Disney Wiki. Anyway, post-credits, we come upon a familiar place, a familiar Victorian London, as we've all seen in adaptations, opening with Ebenezer Scrooge, played here by Scrooge McDuck, voiced by Alan Young, walking down the streets, being cheap and proud of it. His clerk, Bob Cratchit, is played by Mickey Mouse, voiced by Wayne Allwine, not for the first time, but one of them. Scrooge's cheapness is somewhat exaggerated here to nice comedic effect. Scrooge's nephew Fred is, as you might expect, played by McDuck's actual nephew Donald, voiced by Clarence Nash in his final performance. Gotta say, I know that in past episodes I've said that Tony Anselmo is a much better Donald than Clarence Nash, but this being Nash's last performance before his death, he's actually sounding a lot better than Anselmo does these days. Anselmo needs to get on training and replacement like Nash did. And let's see, Allwine's acting isn't as good here as it would be later on. Wayne Allwine is definitely the best Mickey ever, but he hasn't quite found his footing yet. And, yeah, it's hitting all the well-known beats from the story. After Fred departs, we get the Charity Collectors, played by Rat and Mole from The Wind in the Willows, voiced by Hal Smith and Will Ryan, who were some of the most prolific voice actors of the 80s. I gotta say, McDuck's portrayal of Ebenezer Scrooge is much more cheerful than what you usually get from the character. It's kind of bizarre, considering what a bitter old man Ebenezer usually is, but no, Scrooge as Scrooge is really reveling in his cheapness. So Scrooge walks home and we get perhaps the most iconic moment in the story, his door knocker turning into Jacob Marley's face. Jacob Marley is played by Goofy, who is voiced by Hal Smith. I gotta say, Goofy isn't a very good Jacob Marley, and Hal Smith isn't a very good Goofy. Now, on the first point, well, Goofy had to be somebody, and somebody had to be Marley. Every adaptation of A Christmas Carol with pre-existing characters has some casting problems like that. On the second point, Goofy would go through several voice actors throughout the 80s, Smith, Will Ryan, Tony Pope, before they finally settled on a newcomer, Bill Farmer, who has been the one and only Goofy from the year 1990 to the present day, and is easily the best actor the character has ever had. If I'm not summarizing the plot so much, it's because, well, we all know it. We've all seen dozens of Christmas carols. I'm more interested in this film's impact on the Disney cast of characters going forward. Doing this for Keys and Kingdoms, I guess a typical Victorian London setting would provide very good inspiration for the country in the K&K universe that represents the British Isles. I don't remember the name of the country. I've been pretty out of it the past couple of months. Shayfell, that's the name of the country. Had to look it up on my map. And yes, we all know the story of Jacob Marley. For every act of evil, he forges a new link on a chain, and now in death he carries the chain throughout eternity, going among his fellow man when he didn't in life. Definitely a solid template for a K&K afterlife, or at least like one possible variant of undead, something Marley-based, maybe. And so Scrooge, as they say, bears a chain just as Marley does, and will be visited by 3 spirits who might help him change his ways. Marley does the Goofy holler as he departs. Fucking classic, man. Let me see if I can do the Goofy holler. That was awful, I'm sorry. So Scrooge goes to bed and is soon visited by the ghost of Christmas Past, a genuine eldritch abomination in the book. Most film portrayals of this ghost are a bit more pleasant to look at, and so is the case here with Christmas Past, portrayed by Jiminy Cricket, voiced by Eddie Carroll. He naturally takes Scrooge into his past, He passes over Scrooge's childhood and instead goes right to his first job, at Fezziwig's. It's never really explained in the book what gets done at Fezziwig's, or what Scrooge does for a living now, for that matter, but in this film, Fezziwig's is a tea company, and Fezziwig is played by Mr. Toad. Extras in the scene include Waldo from the Aristocats, a few Robin Hood cast members, the Three Little Pigs, Chip and Dale, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and a few other characters I don't recognize. Scrooge's old flame, named Isabel in this movie, is played by Daisy Duck, which is kind of an awkward bit of casting there, shipping Scrooge with Daisy. Yeah. She's voiced by Patricia Paris, who I'm not familiar with. I know Daisy, too, went through quite a lot of voice actors throughout her career before they finally settled on Tress MacNeille. Present-day Scrooge remembers how much he loved her, and Jiminy shows him the day Scrooge came to love money more than her. Scrooge is heartbroken, but soon he has his encounter with the Ghost of Christmas Present, played by Willie the Giant, voiced by Will Ryan. This seems to be the role Willie the Giant was born to play. He completely nails the character. Willie takes Scrooge around present-day London to see that there are some people who show Scrooge generosity. At the Cratchit house, Mrs. Cratchit is naturally played by Minnie, who has no lines. I'm pretty sure Russi Taylor was Minnie's one and only voice actress from the 80s to this year when she died. No. Wayne Allwine and Russi Taylor... Sorry, it's Russi Taylor. Yeah, that's, as I know from listening to Rob Paulson's podcast, it's okay. Wayne Allwine and Russi Taylor met at a recording session when they were playing Mickey and Minnie, and they eventually fell in love and got married. Isn't that just the cutest romance possible? So Wayne died in 2008, and Russi, like I said, died earlier this year, and I don't know what kind of afterlife I believe in, but it definitely makes me teary-eyed to think that, maybe they're reunited somehow. The Cratchit children, including Tiny Tim and two others, are played by those little nephews Mickey has, the mouse counterparts of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, who aren't quite as popular in animation as they are in storybooks and comics. I've never actually seen them animated anywhere else, but Tiny Tim is voiced by a real little kid, and it's adorable. Scrooge realizes he underpays Cratchit, and that Tiny Tim will not live much longer if he continues to do so. Willie vanishes and is replaced by the Ghost of Christmas Future, played by a cigar-chomping Pete, also voiced by Will Ryan. Pete shows Scrooge the Cratchit family at Tiny Tim's grave, then shows him a pair of grave-digging weasels, voiced by Will Ryan and Wayne Allwine in one of Allwine's very few non-Mickey acting roles ever. Pete reveals that it's Scrooge's grave and knocks him in, and wow, I did not expect an eruption of hellfire from the bottom of the grave in this particular incarnation. Yikes. But Scrooge awakens in his own room to find it's Christmas morning, yada yada yada, you know how it goes, you've seen it. He donates to the charity guys, he tells Fred he'll see him at dinner, and he goes to Cratchit's house pretending to be angry before giving him a bunch of gifts and a pay raise. And, holy cow, 25 minutes in, the movie is over, but the video I bought is nearly an hour. What comes next? Well, I'll be damned, I should have read the description. There are 5 other holiday-themed shorts included in this purchase. I'll have to save those for when Natty comes to visit for Christmas. Well, alright then. I'll be seeing you for the next episode tomorrow, I hope. Hope it works out that way. God bless us, everyone, if you're into that sort of thing. Huh?